Getting into the aftermath of everything with Charlie Kirk, right now there's a lot of information that is being shared online, and we're actually getting into what happened in the Hamptons and all of this crazy stuff going on. Right now, Candace has come out a lot, and she's basically talking about how Charlie was feeling pressure from his donors to make sure that whatever he was saying was favorable to Israel, and that they did not like that he was platforming voices who were basically anti-Israel and just not really doing what they expected him to do. And so all of this is coming from Candace, but there's been a few other sources who have basically corroborated or had the same, telling of events that in the Hamptons, Charlie Kirk was yelled at, berated, and all of this stuff because of whatever decisions he was making. And then that was kind of backed up by him going on the Megyn Kelly show. He basically talked about how he wasn't getting good messages from people who were calling him an anti-Semite and who were really upset with him for whatever he was doing. And I think that this was a big misstep here, because if you have an organization of people who are only supporting Israel and they never say anything to criticize it, it actually makes you look better when you have an organization that is allowing those other voices to come in and say whatever they have to say. Because if you can convert someone to your side who doesn't already agree with you, that should be a win. But if you're only willing to speak to the people and associate with the people who agree with you, then obviously you're never going to be able to expand your numbers, because you're not trying to do anything genuine to get those people to your side, right? And so what was revealed is that he was berated at this Hamptons meeting. This was an event to basically do a campus tour with ambassadors, because I guess Charlie Kirk was realizing that, hey, the young voters are not for Israel. We need to kind of figure out how to address this and bridge the gap and all of that stuff. And so there was an event at the Hamptons at Bill Ackman's house. And it's really concerning when you think about that this event was held to basically get influencers to influence other people to be pro-Israel. And that's very concerning, because it's basically the equivalent of what AIPAC is doing with Congress and trying to get regular citizens and people who follow these influencers to be more pro-Israel. And I don't know how obvious it would have been. And so that's a little bit scary when you think about it in that light, because you never know who is influencing who to do what, or what organizations are influencing you to do what or not do, right? And so that is really wild to hear that, one, they were willing to pay him $150 million to be more pro-Israel. And this is something that Nick confirmed on his show that he did basically later in the day, yesterday after Candace's show. He mentioned that he watched it and he didn't really agree that Israel, the government, was responsible or behind Charlie Kirk's assassination, but he did think that they were guilty of other things. And so one thing that he pointed out was that he felt like Candace came on and basically didn't tell all of the details, and Bill Ackman did. And so that made him look a little bit better, and it made them look bad as far as Candace and I think Max Blumenthal or something like that. What I want to say to that is I don't think it's really relevant why they were at the event or who was at the event or when the event was and all of that stuff. I think what matters is what happened at the event and then kind of what it led to. So the big thing for me is, one, the offer of $150 million, and then being offered to go on a trip to Israel, which it is said that Charlie Kirk turned down both. And so if you are offering someone $150 million to advocate for your cause and they say no, what do you escalate to at that point? What is the next step, right? If you really want this person on your side, are you saying, hey, okay, we just need to throw more money at them or more whatever at them, or is this a lost cause and we can't do anything about it? And so I think that this was a huge missed opportunity to allow different voices into the Turning Point organization so that you can get more people to believe or listen to what you have to say. And I don't know if that is likely to happen now, because I feel like with all of this stuff coming out, it feels like Turning Point USA is kind of tainted in a way with all of this stuff going on about how he was starting to have a different opinion or just kind of shifting his views a little bit on Israel. And so in that sense, because Turning Point is not able to naturally pivot where Charlie Kirk was pivoting, and it feels like it's stuck in this moment in time, and I don't know if they'll be able to get out of it, especially with all of this talk that is going on. I know that Erica Kirk spoke a few days ago and she addressed the nation, and I think they got like 32,000 people to sign up for Turning Point USA chapter, which is really cool, which is really amazing. So it was really effective to say, hey, if you want to get involved in politics, you want to make a difference, fans and you want to keep Charlie Kirk's memory going, sign up for Turning Point USA. So I think that was very effective. But at the same time, with all of this nastiness coming out, I feel like it kind of hurts Turning Point USA a little bit, to where it's not going to have the same reach that it used to have in terms of Israel. It's definitely going to preserve Charlie Kirk's memory and what he lived for and what he stood for. I don't think that the two are going to kind of easily mesh as they did before, and so I really think that that was a huge missed opportunity to not allow these different conversations to happen and to demonstrate that you really are willing to debate other people, because that was Charlie's whole thing. He wanted to debate people who didn't agree with him, prove me wrong. So how can you, if you know Israel, the government, that this is his thing, why would you not let him debate other people and have those conversations? And so I just find that super interesting, because that had to be a point of contention for him as well, that this is your whole thing and you can't do what you want to do. And then on top of that, you are possibly feeling like you're forced in this position and it's not reflecting your values or something like that. And so I just find that super interesting. Again, I don't know a whole lot of information about this. I'm only going off of what is reported, and whether or not that is true, we will find out all of the details as they come out. And so anyway, Candace is really putting pressure on people to come out with the truth. I think she actually dared people to lie on the record so that she can go on the record and release text messages exposing people. And so I've seen a lot of comments where people are like, hey, Candace is doing too much, she needs to get sued and all of that stuff. I don't really understand why that is the reaction, because Charlie Kirk, he's kind of being smeared as a racist, and people are like, hey, this is not true, this is what he actually said. They're taking his comments and his quotes out of context, and then some people are just flat out quoting him incorrectly, and so that is a problem. And I did release a video to kind of address some of that issue, but for someone who actually knew him and is hearing these, I guess, awful comments about him, but they know are not true, and then on top of it, you have his relationship with Israel being presented a certain way that may not necessarily be true, I think that is a little bit damaging, and that can trigger anyone who truly was his friend to want to come out and defend him. And I saw people commenting on the video that she did yesterday and saying, hey, you read ads through it, but one of her ads was basically for Nimi Skincare and basically saying that they would match any donations to Turning Point USA. So it wasn't like she was just doing it all about herself or just trying to monetize the situation. You can tell that she's truly angry and she wants justice for Charlie Kirk, and she's not going to allow people to lie about him. And I really do think that that is good, because I was thinking that a lot of people who knew him and were his friends, they are going to be mourning, and they're not going to really be in a position to, not that they won't defend him, but they're not going to be in a position to where they're going to tell everyone, hey, calm down, relax, don't be violent, and all of that stuff. And so Candace wants all of this smoke. She's not going to allow any of this to stand. And I do think that it's weird that they're keeping his show going and they're having different people go on the show. I never watched Charlie Kirk's show, and I don't even know if you can find episodes on YouTube, because I did want to look for the Megyn Kelly interview, but it's on her show, not his. But when I go to his channel, I just see basically clips of the Prove Me Wrong debate, and I don't see his longer form shows. And so I think that kind of addresses why Netanyahu did not do an interview with Charlie Kirk, because he's not really on YouTube. And the three people she mentioned, the Nelk Boys, Brandon Tatum, and then somebody else, PBD, those are all videos on YouTube. I don't really see Charlie Kirk's longer interviews and debates and all of that stuff from like his show and other content that he's done on YouTube, so it's not accessible. So it feels like he was just trying to reach people on YouTube. I'm not 100% sure if I have that correct, but that was just what came to mind when Candace asked that question on her show today. Now, getting into why all of this is happening is because, one, Candace didn't really like the way that Netanyahu went on a press tour, basically, and said, hey, Charlie Kirk, he was really advocating for Israel, he was a friend of ours, blah, blah, blah. She felt like he was really using this situation to his advantage, and so she wanted to come out and clear the air and say, hey, there's actually some friction going on, things weren't all okay, and blah, blah, blah. And even Tucker came out and said, hey, this was not a good move that he did. He should not have done this, especially with Charlie Kirk passing away and then using him to kind of prop up his own agenda. So I can agree that that was a bad look for sure, and I think that people are right to call him out, or at least call out that behavior. Now, in terms of Candace bringing up that Charlie Kirk was considering, or at least she was trying to encourage him to convert to Catholicism. I didn't really see the relevance of that. So I'm not super religious, so I don't know why people would convert to Catholicism. But I don't know if she was thinking like, hey, he was so distressed that he needed to do something not necessarily extreme, but he needed to really like go the distance to, I guess, right things spiritually, or kind of like not necessarily atone, but just help him recenter and rebalance himself. And so I don't know if that's what she was getting at when she was saying that he was going through a spiritual transition and all of that stuff. I'm not 100% sure what it means, but I also don't know if it's super relevant, because for me, the big thing is, hey, there's tension with Israel. He's having a falling out with his donors. There's $150 million being offered. There's a trip to Israel, and both things were turned down. And so that really helps you see how much tension there was. And he even spoke about it when he did his Megyn Kelly interview, and then also the Ben Shapiro interview, where he's saying, hey, is the media lying to us about what's going on with Israel and all of that. Honestly, he's asking questions that you would want someone like him to ask, because he could have the knowledge to address those things, right? But if he's asking those questions and you can't answer them in a way that isn't just all about PR and all of that stuff, like with the Netanyahu YouTube videos, it does seem like a PR tour where he's just giving you the perfect answer. Obviously, you would assume that there would have been an honest conversation between Charlie Kirk and whoever, like his donors, so that when he's asked those questions, he can give a different answer, a better answer. If you have Charlie Kirk asking those questions and you can't really answer them, that's a huge problem. So I think that that's probably the bigger issue, that he has these questions that he can't answer, because if he's the face of your movement and he's getting people to your side, and even he is having these questions that aren't getting answered, that is a little bit problematic, and it creates chaos. So I don't even know if it was that he was asking these questions that he shouldn't have been asking or whatever, as much as it was not being able to properly combat those questions and kind of reassure people that nothing crazy was happening, if that makes sense. And so it's all very crazy when you hear about it and you think about it in those terms, but I think that this is the most compelling part of the situation, aside from dealing with the shooter and all of that stuff. And so getting back to the tension with Israel, Candace did show her text messages, and she showed text messages in her tribute video, and those are very easy to follow, and you can just see the vibes and the dynamics. And then in the screenshot that she posted of a recent text exchange between them, it did seem a little bit weird and coded, and like it was kind of difficult to figure out what he was really saying. I don't recall everything in the screenshot, but that was my initial impression of looking at that screenshot. And so I do find it interesting that, again, he is said to have been going through the spiritual transition, and I would love to know more about what that was and why it was happening. Was it that he was feeling discontent with what he was having to do, or is it something that was completely unrelated and he just wanted to convert or whatever, and the two things are being conflated? I don't know. Now, in terms of Candace speaking up about all of this, she is getting a lot of flack, and people are saying, hey, it's not your place, people should sue her, blah, blah, blah. I actually think that she's the perfect person to speak on this, being that she was canceled from the Daily Wire, which is very pro-Israel, just 2 or 3 years ago at this point. And so she's a public figure who has been through this sort of cancellation for not saying whatever Israel wants her to say, right? And so I also wonder how much her situation has impacted the situation with Charlie Kirk, because she was a very public figure who spoke out, lost everything, lost her YouTube channel, had to start over, and she's back and bigger than ever, right? And so obviously the same thing could have happened with Charlie Kirk. He could have lost everything and then still been able to bounce back. But would you be able to survive as a government if you have two very prominent people who speak to different audiences, who have left kind of your movement of supporting Israel, and now they're kind of doing their own thing and basically not necessarily getting people to go against Israel, but they're not supporting you either, if that makes sense? And so obviously you can say that Candace is not pro-Israel, she's anti-Israel, she doesn't like what the government is doing, right? And so can you afford to have two powerful people who are speaking out about that? And I did see a tweet where somebody was basically saying that Charlie Kirk's pastor came out and he said, hey, Charlie wouldn't like what she's doing and all of that stuff. And so I do find it interesting, because we know that they were super close, and I don't know exactly what it is that she's doing that is so kind of off-putting to other people. She's advocating for her friend. She's saying, hey, this is the truth, don't let people lie to you, basically. And obviously we're still trying to figure out what exactly the truth is. I think there is some merit and there is obviously some tension between Charlie Kirk and the government of Israel and his donors. Now, in terms of Candace speaking out about this, I think she's the perfect person, again, because she just went through something like this, and obviously she is the most willing to speak up for Charlie and say, hey, this was actually what was going on. And so I really like that she addressed those comments, because again, with the pastor saying, hey, this is not what Charlie would want, she should basically be quiet. I think it is good that she's speaking out, and she clarified on her show today that the only people who can get her to shut up are her husband and Erica Kirk. And so that speaks volumes, because she is really going to bat for this issue, and she really wants to make sure that Charlie Kirk is being properly represented, and then also too that people are not getting in the way of taking advantage of the situation and promoting and kind of spreading messages that aren't necessarily true, especially in this climate of information wars. We do have people who are misquoting Charlie, who are saying things that he said out of context, and then we do have a lot of people who are hating him for those reasons. And so it is super important that you do correct the narrative, and I think that's fine for Candace to do. If she's willing to risk everything to do that and she's fighting for the truth, she should absolutely be able to do that. Now, if she's completely wrong, then obviously she will deal with the consequences of that. Now, for me, what is super interesting about everything that has come out is the offer for $150 million, and then also the trip to Israel. We've seen people really talk a lot about these trips to Israel and the purpose and what it's supposed to do and all of that stuff, but being offered $150 million to influence Americans to think a certain way about a certain topic is very concerning, because you don't really think about how people are actually trying to buy your support. Like, obviously people market stuff to us all the time, whether it's on TV shows and ads and commercials, that sort of thing. But to know that people are willing to spend big money to make sure that you think a certain way is super concerning. And the fact that he turned down that money is very eye-opening, and it makes you wonder what exactly was the friction, why was there friction, and why did they not just let him debate people who did not think the same as him, and why did they not let him platform people with opposing views? Because that would have been a perfect opportunity for him to demonstrate what he was all about, which is prove me wrong, debate me, and whatever, right? He should have been allowed to do that. I think the fact that he wasn't is really probably the most concerning part about it, because again, if you can only say one thing and that's all you're allowed to say, that does put you in an uncomfortable position, especially when you change, when your stances change and all of that stuff. You should be able to naturally ebb and flow and shift your viewpoints. When you can't even do that, it does feel uncomfortable after a while. And so I think that that's probably the biggest misstep here, is that you are so focused on making sure that people were pro whatever or anti whatever, that there was a missed opportunity to really convert people and get them to your side through healthy debate, because now there's a lot more people who are going to churches because of everything that happened with Charlie Kirk. There are people who are losing their faith in whatever is going on because of what happened to Charlie Kirk, and I don't know if it necessarily moved things in the right direction if you are really trying to get people to be pro-Israel. Alrighty, so to wrap up this episode, we are waiting for Dave Smith to come on at 8. It is 7:07. I'm not sure if I'm going to have this episode up before then, but I really just wanted to come on and talk about kind of like the newer developments with this Charlie Kirk situation. I didn't want to spend too much time or any time really talking about the shooter and anything going on with that. I'm more interested in this conversation of there being tension between Charlie Kirk and Israel and the donors who supported Turning Point USA, and what does it really mean when you take money from an organization and you're expected to kind of make sure that you live up to whatever it was they donate their money for. And so that definitely brings up this question of who are your supporters, what are they expecting of you, and how does it go when you no longer want to communicate that message to your followers, to your audience, right? How do you get out of those relationships and those agreements that you no longer want to be a part of? And so I find that super interesting, because I'm wondering if with all of this nastiness and craziness that is coming out, how does this hurt Turning Point USA? Because I feel like Turning Point USA was Charlie Kirk. I'm not sure how I feel about people taking up the mantle of Charlie Kirk while we're still trying to figure out where he stood and what he actually wanted to happen going forward. And so we'll leave this here. We are going to wait until 8 to see what Dave Smith comes out with. He is basically going to respond to Candace's challenges from yesterday, where she said, hey, go on the record and tell the truth about what happened. If you lie, I'm going to expose everything. So again, we're trying to clarify what happened in the Hampton, What were the conversations that Charlie Kirk had with different people? What was the point of friction? And what was the resolution going forward? How was this supposed to be handled, being that Charlie Kirk turned down $150 million in funding and turned down a trip to go to Israel? Alrighty, so we'll see you later once we have watched Dave Smith's episode.